Here's my video on action potentials. Here's my multipolar neuron, which has a resting membrane potential of negative 70 millivolts. The main extracellular ion is sodium, and the main intracellular ion is potassium. So starting with the presynaptic neuron, it will release neurotransmitter into the synapse. This neurotransmitter, for example, acetylcholine, binds to the receptors, and it will open ligand-gated channels on the dendrites. When these open, the sodium will start to enter through these ligand-gated channels, and it will start to depolarize the cell. The more neurotransmitter released from the presynaptic neuron, the more receptors it will bind to, and the more ligand-gated channels it will open, which allows more sodium to come in. And that is called a graded response. And the more sodium comes in, the more it will depolarize, making it closer to threshold. And if it reaches threshold, which is negative 55 millivolts, it will cause voltage-gated channels to open in the axon hillock. Sodium will come in through these voltage-gated channels super fast, which will depolarize membrane potential all the way to about positive 30 millivolts, making the inside of the cell more positive than the outside. When the gates open in the axon hillock, the potassium gates open as well, but they open much slower. So once membrane potential gets to about positive 30, that's when most of the potassium starts to leave. So that's the potassium leaving. When this happens, it repolarizes the membrane, making the membrane potential come all the way back down to about negative 80 millivolts. So now you have all the sodium on the inside and all of the potassium on the outside, but the ions are on the wrong side. So the sodium-potassium pump is going to pump them back onto the right side of the membrane. The action potential moves all the way down the axon. This area right here will get depolarized and then repolarized. In doing so, you cause the next area to reach threshold 2, and their voltage-gated channels will open till it gets all the way down to this terminal end. Once it makes it to the terminal end, it will cause the postsynaptic neuron to release its neurotransmitter. Here's another drawing of the action potential shown in 3 different phases. Here it's showing the resting membrane potential at negative 70 millivolts, and when the ligand-gated channels are open, it will start to depolarize, and if enough is released, it will make it all the way to negative 55 millivolts, which is threshold. Shown in phase 1 is the voltage-gated channels opening once it has reached threshold. It will depolarize the cell all the way up to positive 30 millivolts. Shown in phase 2 is as soon as the potassium starts coming through their voltage-gated channels on the axon hillock, it will start to repolarize the membrane. And it will repolarize all the way to negative 80 millivolts, which is hyperpolarization. And the last phase, phase 3, is showing the sodium-potassium pump putting the ions back on their side to reset the whole membrane, returning the resting membrane potential to negative 70 millivolts.